Hey guys, Akio Murasaki here. Today I want to be talking about Japanese localizations and why this topic is always so incredibly complicated, especially when you talk about this on social media, and then a little bit, or even more so, about a very specific localizer who's just infamous in both the industry and in social media. But let's first cycle back to localization itself and exactly why it's such a massive problem. There's always some crap storm going on about this. So apparently, at least from what I've heard from localizers directly, is that localization is a very, very complex process. You have a lot of parties, people involved. You have the publisher on the Japanese side, the publisher on the US side. You have discussions about target audiences. You have discussions about demographics, about who the product, the game, and the localization is for, how it needs to align with the local regulations, with the laws, with the culture, yada 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 yada. You have a lot of different components to the process. I understand it's a complicated process. That's completely fair. However, what I do also notice is that localizers, even though they claim it's a complicated process, they still claim a lot of initiative and a lot of agency when it comes to localizations. On one hand, I really want to give a lot of them, at least some of them, some benefit of the doubt. But whenever I give one or two of them a benefit of the doubt, we end up seeing them revealing themselves as making some kind of assumption, some kind of statement that some word or sentence in Japanese personally offended them, and therefore they themselves privately, as an of their own volition and based on their own personal judgment, they had to change something. This happens continuously. And what is the more interesting, that this seems to be happening only and specifically in the weeb adjacent parts of the Japanese pop culture. It happens in manga, it happens in anime, in light novel, in video games as well. But for whatever reason, it does not seem to happen in professional translations. And I wonder why. I've interacted with multiple translators on X specifically, some of them also previously on Reddit, and I've never seen any translator who would be doing actual professional translations to have all of these weird political and very hyper ideologically based opinions on how translations and how localization should be done. No, most of them were talking more broadly about the techniques, about word choices, about trying to stay faithful to the original, the technical stuff. And whenever you switch to any weeb conversations, to anime, manga, games, you end up with people being extremely brain rotted and being personally offended by something that was said in the Japanese original, or having to insert ever so slightly their own political agendas into the medium. And I really do not understand why. And one of these heroes, and also one more thing, whenever you as a client, as a player, as a consumer of the Japanese medium are upset with the decisions, you end up with screenshots like this one. You end up with Katrina Leonodakis, who's our hero today, talking about there were misaligned subtitles and there were broken capitalization. She always ends up bringing up these very low typesetting, very, very basic typesetting issues as if this has absolutely anything to do with the core of the localization process. This has nothing to do with the translation. This has everything to do with editorial work, which is honestly, frankly, very simplistic and can be caught by any person who's not an actual localizer. And to top it off, from my personal experience, I can straight away tell you that any person who is a higher intermediate or fairly proficient in Japanese, but maybe not as, super high level professional to do actual certified or core translations or translations of documents, any person being higher intermediate and simply thoroughly understanding Japanese culture is more than capable to do the majority of anime and manga translations. Games are a little more difficult, especially the ones that have either archaic speech, like Unicorn Overlord, or fantasy games that are set sometime in like medieval periods. Obviously, these titles are a little more complicated, but for the majority of other titles, I will tell you straight away, higher intermediate is more than sufficient. But let's go back to our fantastic Katrina Leonidakis here. What is going on with Katrina recently? Yeah, so I talked a little bit already about how localizers are absolutely disingenuous. Here's, for instance, Neil Broadley. I actually like many of the posts from Neil. I do appreciate his contributions, but sooner than later, Neil, I notice he doesn't actually interact with people he doesn't like. He doesn't actually want to engage with any of the discussions. He doesn't approach any of the criticism. No, he just replies to people who like his posts, to people who agree with him. Again, a very common theme for English localizers online. I don't know why they're like this. But the very interesting thing that someone brought up here, Lavender on X, if you hired someone to translate and send you something you're a fan of from another country and then find out they tore pages and scribbled out some dialogue bubbles purely because they personally didn't like them, would you ever hire that person again? Highly doubtful. Well, the thing is, in web media localization, you actually would. Many of these people fail upwards. They do a terrible job. They do terrible work. They do absolutely horrendously bad localizations, as we're soon going to see, and they still get hired more. They still get praise, they still glaze themselves up in all of their friends on social media, and somehow end up getting hired. It's a complete mystery to me, to be honest. But yeah, cycling back a little bit to our hero here, Katrina Leonidakis, she made this series of posts recently on Blue Sky. Yes, Blue Sky, unfortunately, I'm not a active participant of Blue Sky, and I do absolutely not regret, because I think it's an absolute hellhole. No one should go there, honestly. But she made this series of very weird and completely lacking self-awareness posts on Blue Sky, and talking about the good localization and how it is a profit enabler. Again, most of the localizations are trash, and still yet people buy the product. So I don't exactly know how a good localizations would even look like, because we very rarely do see them. So yeah, point doesn't really stand. However, then she made this comment here highlighted in yellow. If you're a fan and want to do something to pressure companies into paying for union actors, there's an overlap here between localizers and voice actors who are equally insufferable on social media. And good translation, bully them. Send emails shaming them. Comment how you will never buy their game again. Call their customer support line. Little did she know that people who virtue on social media never actually buy the product. So none of these calls to action are even relevant whatsoever. However, again, we see a common theme here. Localizers are not there to do their job. No, quite the contrary. They're to do the work, do the social justice work, which in this case is more or less cancel culture. Now, the funny thing with Katrina is that she currently works in Japan for a bigger company. Unfortunately, we don't know what company that is. Otherwise, someone might actually send emails to that company to get her fired, but I step out of line here. She's working in Japan, and I don't think Japan would be very happy with seeing a person, an employee of any company, haphazardly sending emails around and bullying employees of other companies, because they absolutely need to hire union actors from the US or hire localizers such as Katrina here to do any of their trash localizations. Yeah, she would get totally fired, like, instantly. One of the things is that Japanese people don't necessarily like friction in society. They consider it harmful. Therefore, they do not actively engage in it. They do sometimes do it on social media when it comes to defending their hobbies, their fandoms. That's completely normal. Or when there's like a very polarizing situation. But when it comes to like direct interactions, they do try to avoid conflict at all costs. And I would say that this would qualify as direct interaction in a way, because you're directly sending an email to someone, or to a person, not even to directly to the company. And this is not considered a good thing. And unsurprisingly, so she did point out not to interact with the troll. So anyone who doesn't necessarily agree with her is automatically a troll. Yes, great, Katrina, thank you. We know, you know, get the hell out. Anyway, she found out. Her account on Blue Sky was suspended, yes. I'm actually surprised. I thought that people on Blue Sky do love this kind of attitude, but it might have been, and I'm being very hopeful here, it might have been that perhaps some people who are also in Japan did notice this and did actually report her. So good riddance. Someone also pointed out that her account here on X has been protected recently. I don't think it has been protected recently. I've actually seen her account being protected way before that. So this is no news whatsoever. But just to give you a sample of the amazing work that Katrina does, like we couldn't live without her amazing translation work. By the way, before I go into the examples, just a very interesting tangent here. I've actually seen the translations she does on her posts when she keeps on glazing how amazing she is on social media. They're actually not bad. So when it comes to actually doing the job you're being hired for, not doing the work as people like her like to talk about, which is actually just doing her job. She can do her job. But unfortunately, doing your job, gets in the way of social activism, and therefore it's not a priority, obviously, for these kind of people. But yes, we have things like this, where the manga says this has to be a joke, and then the subtitles, which she did, by the way, yes, she did gushing over magical girl here. We have Utena, we have the other character. There's subverting expectations, and then there's this bullshit. I do remember that scene. I watched the entire anime, the entire first season of Gushing Over Magical Girls in Japanese. And no, Utena did not say these two lines. She said something closer to the manga, actually. So yeah, we have, as usual, the case of subverting expectations, I guess, where the expectation is that they would just do their job, and that seems to be impossible. But of course, we have more examples. This one's a very old one from 2023, but unfortunately, it does highlight how highly these people think of themselves. And as I said, all you need to have is higher intermediate, good understanding of Japanese culture, is all, which is basically why AI is being aggressively used to replace these people, because their job is frankly redundant. I love this post from Katrina. 2023, ladies and gentlemen, the highlight of her career. I am unfortunately doing some of my finest localization work on the anime about the high school girl who is legitimately sexually attracted to a corgi. Ladies and gentlemen, my finest work. I yeeted you, okay? My God. Even reading this today, this is absolutely horrendous. Yeah, this is your finest work. There are people translating court documents. There are people translating chemistry dissertations. She is translating lines for an anime about a girl who likes her corgi a little too much. Yeah, I'm sure that this is finest localization work. I'm sure it is. And just to also point out here, Packer Girl has been amazing, absolutely instrumental when it comes to highlighting all of the wacky localizations people are doing in Crunchyroll. Primarily Crunchyroll is where we get all of these jewels, where a character says, here, probably the subtitles closer to the original, what that's so badass, and of course in the dubbing you have this like so goated. I do understand that young people do actually talk like this, but not every single young person talks like they spend all of their time online, 90% of it. That's really not the case. And also, I think I might have mentioned this in one of my other videos. Anime in the West and also partially in Japan is not just for kids. So targeting this very narrow demographic of terminally online people, terminally online teenagers, probably not a good take in general, especially if you are just making up lines like this one where the character says, "Oh shit," and the dub says, "Sugar, honey, iced tea." How are these two lines equivalent? And of course, there is more, because there's always more. Like we have this one, where the guy says, "Together we can win on beauty alone." And just to really point out and drive it home, if you're a dub actor, if you're a voice actor, and you are able to deliver, put emphasis in that line, that carries. You are doing the actual work. You are doing a fine job. But if you are reading "Together we win the M1 on Riz alone," that's not what the character said. I'm sorry to say this. And of course there is more of it. We have thinking you can hide anything from this alpha Chad. It's totally Delulu. Then we have complete made up lines like this one: "Slay the house down, boots Houston, I am deceased." I have no idea what this person is trying to say. But that person basically said, "I never knew you could sing too." Yeah, so nothing of what the dub is trying to imply here. And then we have moments when the localizer are just trying to insert their own fetish, like this one here, "Eek senpai," and the dubbing says, "Hold me, papa." Yeah, apparently it's just not enough to properly do their work. I'm actually looking forward to see whether Katrina eventually is going to be let go, and maybe then she's going to go to, I don't know, gardening perhaps, something that's a little more suitable for her. Because I am very much looking forward to the day when we can go back to kind of fun subs, I guess, where we can finally have decent localizations. I want to say again, they've never really been accurate. It's mostly the fan subs that were doing a decent job. I hope maybe the standards improve eventually when we roll out some AI here and there and, move some of that menial translation work to algorithms that will do a better job. Because let's be perfectly honest here, if you are able to feed like the entire text of an anime, for instance, like page after page of text with separation into characters, and that model has been trained, for instance, on like teenage speak, absolutely zero problem getting this translation done within like a day. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a game changer. With that, I would like to end the video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Mata ne!